Hello and welcome to The Culture Bar, an arts and culture podcast series brought to you by HarrisonParrott. In our Speed Podcast mini-series of quick insights into music and culture from around the world, we talk to music industry professionals about the music of their homeland to give us a view into different music, composers, sounds and instruments which make music both unique and universal. Today, we will be talking to HarrisonParrott Artist Coordinator, Maja, all about the music of Poland. So Maja, please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Hello, so I'm Maja Rath and I'm Polish. I was born and raised in Poland. At one point I moved to Germany with my parents, where I finished my degrees and studied music. And now I'm living in London and work for HarrisonParrott as an artist coordinator.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maja. So seeing as this is a speed podcast, we should dive straight into the nitty-gritty of all things Polish music. So it would be great to start off with getting your opinions on what has influenced Polish music.
Well, I think there are a lot of things that of course, could be mentioned. But I feel that Polish history that has been quite interesting and also dates back till the 10th century. So Poland as a country was established in the 10th century already. So since then, there is a lot that you can mention, I would say, in Polish history. But I think a lot of things influenced the most important Polish composers, also the Polish music that we know now. Maybe important to mention is the fact that at the end of the 18th century, Poland was not a country anymore. It was divided between three other countries, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. And in that time, it was for more than 100 years, there was no Poland on the map. And despite the fact the Polish culture, literature, arts, and also music developed quite a lot. The most well-known Polish composer, Frédéric Chopin, was born in that time, worked in that time, and never really experienced free Poland in his lifetime. So this is something that I think is quite important, and there are many more who were living in that time. Chopin, also Szymanowski, and other really important Polish artists like Joseph Mehofer, for example, which is who is a very, very important Polish painter. So yeah, this is quite interesting. Also, the literature developed immensely in that time. I think people were very much influenced by the fact that they couldn't really live their Polish culture, and the revolution in them inspired them quite a lot.
Oh, that's really fascinating, actually, that, Poland just didn't even exist, yet the culture was able to thrive so much, to be able to, have all of these incredible composers, all of these really iconic pieces of music. That's really incredible that, that they were able to thrive in such a way. And do you think that they were writing, these pieces of music for the kind of repressed people of Poland in a way? Or do you think it was sort of part of, a kind of another era of music, maybe like romanticism and things like that? Do you think there were maybe some undertones of trying to kind of reach out to the Polish community through their compositions in any way?
Well, I think it was an important bit, especially for Chopin, for example, because his music is influenced with a lot of Polish elements. So it's not only, I think, the history and the fact that he had to go to Paris and couldn't stay in Poland at the end of his life really made him miss the country so much that he was thinking of all the elements of Poland that he could involve into his music, especially at the end. So I think the romantic bits are at the beginning, where he was very young, and so I think that especially at the end of his life, where the very typical Polish pieces and Polish influence pieces like the dances, for example, mazurkas, were written. That's definitely his way of sending a message or expressing how much he missed the country. and it's really lovely. It really feels like you listen to the Polish landscape in many of his pieces. So that's really lovely. This theme of kind of Polish proud and revolution and being wanting to show how important Polish culture is lingered on, and it continued until even the works of Penderecki, who is also very iconic, and he was also influenced by Polish culture a lot, and the history and the fact that there was always some kind of independence battle in the Polish people. So I think this is important to see also.
Yeah, that's really interesting that there's sort of these continuing threads throughout kind of Polish compositions, you know, not just from the time when Poland didn't exist as its own country, but also when it did exist as its own country, and how that's still influencing modern Polish composers now, like you said, with Penderecki, who is just absolutely incredible. So yeah, it's really, really fascinating to see that all of these threads are still kind of existing with all of these compositions that are coming through. I mean, have you noticed any kind of changes maybe with the sort of more modern compositions for classical music in Polish music? Or is it still kind of pulling on those threads from centuries ago?
Well, I think it is still a theme, but there are of course other composers who are influenced differently. I think maybe Kilar is someone doing different things. I know that Lutosławski, for example, someone who did different things as well there. So it's a bit of a different influence there. But there's definitely this element that I mentioned that you can see in many of them. So it's not a must. I think we can't say that they all do that. There's a lot of different Polish music that is really amazing and doesn't have anything to do with the independence fight, but there is a lot that has.
That's really fascinating. And I know that we've talked already and touched on quite a few Polish composers, but it would be great if you could talk a bit more in depth about one or two Polish composers who, in your opinion, really exemplify kind of Polish music, with any recommendations that you have for listeners to tune into and listen to.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, Frédéric Chopin is someone you should mention as a Polish composer, just because of the things I've already said. The fact that his music is influenced so much by the Polish landscape, by the Polish culture, by even the folk music, as I mentioned. His dances and his nocturnes, for example, are there are so many elements of folk music in it. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be at the Chopin competition last month, and once again it is so amazing to hear all these pieces by performers from all over the world. So this is just something very, very special, and you could see how special it is for Polish people as well. What a special role Chopin has in their lives, and people from every background knew about the competition, were listening to the music. You could speak to a taxi driver or someone on the train just randomly about what happened the last day. So it was absolutely fascinating, and I think this is Chopin still has a huge influence on Poland and on people living there. So he definitely is the one to mention. There are so many. I mean, the country has a huge history, but I would also say, of course, Szymanowski, who also was born during the time when Poland was non-existent, and there are so many lovely pieces he composed. Of course, the violin concerto, who I think all of us know, but also opera music. That is really, really something I would recommend. It's really fascinating. And yeah, of course, we can't forget Christophe Pandoretsky, who was very, very dear to us at HarrisonParrott, of course, but also someone who made Polish music being recognized all over the world once again in the past decades. So it's really amazing to see how much influence he had on so many people all over the world, and everyone still performs this music, and it's so great. So yeah, these people are definitely the ones I wanted to mention today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really nice starting point for listeners who want to find out more about Polish composers. I think there's a fantastic top 3 there for people to dive into. So coming towards the end of our podcast recording now, and on to some quick recommendations from Maja to dive even deeper into Polish arts and culture. So Maja, if you would like to start us off with your book recommendation.
Yeah, so I'm very sorry, but there's not one book that I can recommend. But I want to recommend an author who is really interesting. His name is Stanisław Lem, and if you're a fan of science fiction, you should definitely look into his literature, because it's absolutely amazing, and it's so fun to read. It's something completely different, and yeah, I would definitely recommend looking into his works.
Fantastic. And then straight on to a music album.
I've spoken a lot about classical music, but there is a huge amount of popular music as well that is amazing. One of the most popular death metal bands is a Polish one. So this is maybe that's not my recommendation for the album, but it is just to say that there is a lot to dive into. I would recommend an album by the band Zakopower, which is a mixture of popular music and folk music from the Tatra mountains, and the album is called Boso, which means barefoot.
And then your final recommendation for film.
But this is the film The Pianist, that is just I think it suits this context very well. It's about the Polish pianist from the Jewish background, Jewish family, who has survived the Second World War and the Holocaust in Warsaw, also thanks to music and Chopin's music. So if there is anyone who did not see the film, it's definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very emotional and emotive film for sure. And a really great note to end on. Actually, it really ties everything we've talked about absolutely perfectly. So thank you very much for joining us, Maja, for our Speed podcast on Poland.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Culture Bar Speed Pod. Maja Rath was interviewed by me, Fiona Livingston, and you can listen to Maja's Spotify playlist in the link below.